When a husband or a wife dies, the household does not keep both Social Security checks. It keeps the larger one. That is the whole sentence, and almost nobody hears it until the month it happens. 2 checks were paying the same mortgage, the same insurance, the same grocery bill. Then one of them stops, and the bills do not. I am going to walk you through exactly what happens to that check, what the surviving spouse is entitled to, and the ages that decide how much of it survives. The remarriage rule that trips people up. The 2-year deadline on a payment most people never claim, and the order of operations in the first 2 weeks. If you are married, this is the episode you want to have already watched. Let me start with the rule that makes the rest of it make sense. A survivor benefit can be worth up to 100% of what the person who died was receiving, or was entitled to receive. Up to 100%. That is the ceiling, and getting to the ceiling depends almost entirely on one thing, which is the age of the surviving spouse when they claim it. But before the ages, understand the arithmetic of the household, because this is where the shock is. Say a couple gets $2,200 on one record and $1,300 on the other. $3,500 coming into the house every month. One of them dies. The survivor does not get $3,500 and does not get $2,200 plus $1,300 minus something. The survivor keeps the larger amount, $2,200, and the smaller check ends. The household income drops by $1,300 a month, permanently, and it drops in the same month as a funeral. I want you to sit with that number because it is the reason this episode exists. Every plan that assumes both checks continue is wrong by roughly the size of the smaller check. And the smaller check often belongs to the wife, who statistically outlives her husband, which means the household that loses the most is very often the one left with the least ability to replace it. Now the ages, because the ages decide how much of that larger check the survivor actually keeps. A survivor can claim as early as age 60. That is 2 full years earlier than any other Social Security benefit becomes available, and that early door exists on purpose because the need is real. But claiming at 60 comes at a price that never goes away. At 60, the survivor benefit is reduced to about 71.5% of what the deceased was entitled to. That is a cut of roughly 28.5%, and it is permanent. It does not repair itself at 65 or at 67 or ever. If the survivor waits until their own full retirement age for survivor benefits, they can receive up to the full 100%. Between 60 and that age, the amount slides up gradually. So the honest framing is this: claiming at 60 is not a mistake. Claiming at 60 without knowing that it locks in a number for the rest of your life is a mistake. Those are different things, and one of them is fixable with a conversation. There is a second age question, and this is where it gets genuinely useful. Survivor benefits and your own retirement benefit are 2 separate things, and you do not have to take them at the same time. You can take one first and switch to the other later. That opens a real strategy. Somebody who has a decent earnings record of their own might take the survivor benefit early, live on it, and let their own retirement benefit keep growing until 70, then switch. Or the reverse. Somebody with a small record of their own might take their own benefit at 62 and wait on the survivor benefit until their full retirement age, so the survivor amount comes in at the full 100%. Which order is right depends on the size of the 2 records, on your health, and on what other money you have to live on in the meantime. I am not going to tell you which one applies to you because I do not know your numbers. What I am telling you is that the choice exists, and that a lot of people never learn it exists because they walk into an office grieving and say, "What am I supposed to do now?" And they take the first thing offered. Ask this exact question when you file. Can I take one benefit now and switch to the other later? And what would each of those be worth at each age? That single question is the highest paid 20 seconds of your life. Let me put a household on it, because the percentages only land when they have a kitchen table under them. A couple in their late 60s. He worked 38 years in a plant and draws $2,400 a month. She raised 3 children, worked part-time for most of 2 decades, and draws $1,100. $3,500 coming in, a paid-off house, and a budget that works. He dies in March. From April on, she has $2,400. $1,100 a month is simply gone. which is $13,200 a year out of a household that was not wealthy to begin with. Now the part that decides whether she is comfortable or scared. If she had claimed a survivor benefit at 60 rather than at her survivor full retirement age, she would not be living on $2,400. She would be living on roughly $1,700 because the reduction sticks. That difference, month after month, for what could be 25 more years, is the single largest number in her retirement, and it was decided in one appointment. I am not saying nobody should claim at 60. Some people have no other way to eat, and a reduced check today beats a full check they cannot wait for. What I am saying is that when the choice is genuinely open, when there is a bridge of some kind for a few years, the size of that bridge is worth calculating before anybody signs anything. And notice the second thing hiding in her story. The check she now lives on is HIS check, which means the claiming decision he made years earlier, at 62 or 67 or 70, is the decision setting her income for the rest of her life. He was not only choosing for himself. Now the remarriage rule, because this one is quietly cruel to people who do not know it. If a surviving spouse remarries at or after age 60, remarriage does not end eligibility for survivor benefits on the deceased spouse's record. Age 50, if the survivor was entitled to disabled widows or widowers benefits at the time. If a surviving spouse remarries before 60, the survivor benefit generally goes away while that marriage lasts. I know couples who quietly moved a wedding by 4 months because of that line, and I know one widow who did not because nobody told her. 60 is the number. Write it down. Next, the payment almost nobody claims, and it is small, but it is not nothing. Social Security pays a lump sum death payment of $255. It generally goes to the surviving spouse who was living with the deceased, and here is the part that matters. You usually have to request it within 2 years of the death. It is not automatic in every case, and 2 years goes by very fast when somebody is grieving. $255 will not change your life, but it is yours. It takes one phone call, and the deadline is real. Let me talk about who else can be entitled, because the word survivor covers more people than most families realize. A surviving spouse of any age can be entitled if they are caring for the deceased worker's child who is under 16 or disabled. Unmarried children under 18 or up to 19 if still in secondary school can be entitled. A child who became disabled before 22 can be entitled as an adult. Dependent parents 62 or older can be entitled in some cases. And this one surprises people every single time. A divorced spouse can be entitled to survivor benefits on an ex-husband's or ex-wife's record if the marriage lasted at least 10 years, subject to the same remarriage rules I described. A divorce does not erase 10 years of marriage from the record. 2 more situations before the checklist, because they cover a lot of you. The first is the survivor who is still working. If you claim a survivor benefit before your full retirement age and you are still earning wages, the earnings test applies to that benefit the same way it applies to a retirement benefit. Over the annual limit, some of the benefit gets withheld. It is not lost forever, and it gets recalculated later, but in the year it happens, it is money not arriving. If you are 62 and working full-time and somebody suggests filing for survivor benefits immediately, that is the question to ask before you sign. The second is the survivor with a government pension. For decades, a rule called the government pension offset cut or erased survivor benefits for people who had a pension from work not covered by Social Security. Teachers, police officers, firefighters, some state and municipal employees. That rule was repealed by the Social Security Fairness Act, which means a lot of widows and widowers who were told years ago that they were not entitled to anything now are. If you were turned down on those grounds in the past, that answer may no longer be correct, and it costs you nothing but a phone call to ask again. And a third, worth 30 seconds. If your spouse had a pension of their own, find out right now whether it has a survivor option and whether it was elected. Many pensions pay a larger monthly amount while both spouses are alive and nothing after. That election is usually made once, at retirement, and it cannot be changed afterward. If your spouse is still living and that decision has not been made yet, it belongs on the same sheet of paper as the Social Security question. Now the part I most want you to take away. because it is the only part that is under your control today. Here is the order of operations in the first 2 weeks. First, do not call to report the death yourself if a funeral home is involved. The funeral director usually reports it directly to Social Security if you give them the deceased person's Social Security number. Ask them to confirm they did it and write down the date they did. Second, know that the last month is not prorated. Social Security is paid the month after it is earned, and a person must be alive for the entire month to be entitled to that month's payment. If someone dies in June, the payment that arrives in July, which is June's benefit, generally has to be returned. Do not spend it. If it is direct deposited, contact the bank and let it be returned, and do not fight it, because that money is not yours, and it will be recovered either way. Third, and this is the one that costs households real money, apply for survivor benefits promptly and ask about the start date. Survivor benefits are not always paid automatically, and in many cases they are not retroactive without limit. Every month you wait to ask can be a month nobody pays you. Fourth, ask for the lump sum death payment in the same conversation so the 2-year clock is not an issue. Fifth, ask the question I gave you earlier about taking one benefit now and switching later. Ask them to put the numbers on paper. Sixth, look at the whole household budget with fresh eyes within 90 days because one check is gone and some expenses did not fall at all. The mortgage did not fall. The property tax did not fall. Insurance did not fall. What generally does fall is food, one Medicare premium, and some transportation. There is one more thing that changes, and nobody warns people about, and I will keep it to 2 sentences because it belongs to a tax professional and not to me. A surviving spouse usually files as a single taxpayer beginning the year after the death, and single brackets and thresholds are not the same as married ones. Ask whoever does your return what that means for your specific numbers before the first year it applies. Let me put this back together, because these numbers only matter if a real household can use them. If your spouse dies, you keep the larger of the 2 Social Security checks and the smaller one stops. You can claim a survivor benefit as early as 60 at about 71.5%, or wait to your survivor full retirement age for up to 100%. You can take one benefit now and switch to the other later, and asking that question in the office is worth more than anything else you do that day. Remarriage at or after 60 does not cost you the survivor benefit. There is a $255 payment with a 2-year deadline, and a 10-year marriage that ended in divorce still counts. Now here is the assignment, and it is for people whose spouse is still alive, because that is when this is fixable. Sit down together and answer 3 questions on one sheet of paper. Whose benefit is larger, and by how much? What would the household budget look like on the larger check alone, and what would close that gap? A pension survivor option you have not elected, a life insurance policy, a smaller house, or a delayed claiming decision by the higher earner that makes the surviving spouse check bigger for life. That last one deserves a sentence of its own. When the higher earner delays claiming, they are not only raising their own check, they are raising the check that their spouse may live on for another 15 or 20 years. That is the most overlooked reason to wait, and it is worth more to the household than any of the arithmetic people usually argue about. Everything I have described comes from Social Security's own rules, and your own numbers are on your Social Security statement. Confirm anything specific to you at ssa.gov or with your local office, because the details of one person's record can change the answer. If you have already been through this, tell me in the comments what nobody warned you about. This channel has a lot of viewers whose spouse is still sitting in the next room, and what you know is the most useful thing on this page. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, the episode on how the claiming age changes the amount is the natural next one, because the decision the higher earner makes today is the decision that sets this number. See you in the next one.